Welcome to Coffee and Astronomy. I'm Jim Craig. And today I want to talk about eyepieces. A lot of people don't realize that eyepieces are half of the optics in your telescope. And that's one of the places that a lot of telescope manufacturers tend to go on the cheap side. Now, one of the things that's kind of fun about doing these videos is that I learn a lot. I learned a lot more about eyepieces than I ever knew before. But when you go to purchase eyepieces, you're going to see a lot of confusing information. Names, you don't see too many, but Huygens, Ramsden, Koenig, Kellner, RKE, orthoscopic, Plössl, Naegler, all kinds of different eyepieces. And it can get a little daunting and a little confusing. So what I'm hoping to do is sort of help with some of that confusion a little bit. We're going to start by talking about the very simplest eyepiece, the first eyepiece used by Galileo back in 1610, which is what is called a negative lens. You've probably seen, they look like a magnifying glass, but when you look through them, they make everything look small. And that gave him a nice upright view. You know, when he held up his lens and looked at the clock tower across the street, the clock tower was right side up. It doesn't really offer any magnification beyond what the objective lens added. So everything was completely dependent on the objective lens. Then a few years later, Johannes Kepler came up with the idea of using a convex lens. That's the standard magnifying glass type lens. And the image was upside down, but when you're looking at something in space, that hardly matters. In space, there is no up or down. And by changing the focal length of that lens, he could actually change the magnification of his scope. Remember, you take the focal length of your objective lens, divide it by the focal length of your objective lens, of your eyepiece, and you get the magnification of your scope. By the way, if you go into a group, on social media, don't ask for a lens. Ask for an eyepiece. The moment you say lens, you're going to tag yourself as a newbie. And also, a little peeve of mine, lens has one E, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, flash forward a couple years later, and somebody named Christian Huygens, you may remember him. I believe he discovered Titan, and there was a spacecraft that was dropped onto Titan that bore his name. But Christian Huygens came up with the idea of using two convex lenses, flat on one side, curved on the other, called a plano-convex. And he used two of them with their curves both pointing the same direction toward the objective lens. And that gave him better magnification and a clearer view and a wider field of view. Somebody took that idea, turned one of the lenses around so the curves both faced each other, and came up with the Ramsden eyepiece. Now, the Huygens and the Ramsden eyepieces were an improvement, but they're still not on a par with modern eyepieces. So then we flash forward where you get what is called a doublet, and that is two lenses that are cemented together to make one lens, or to act like one lens, but they're made from different kinds of glass, and that helps take care of the sort of rainbow effect, what's called chromatic aberration. And this fellow Ramsden took a doublet and paired it with one of those plano convex, and I believe somewhere here, here. I'm sorry, I went Ramsden. Koenig. You can still get Koenig eyepieces. This one's a few years back. This goes with, this is from University Optics. There's also something else on here I'll talk about a little bit later. I don't know if you can read that. It says multi-coated. One of the problems with a lot of eyepieces is you've got that many pieces of glass together, light will hit it, and glass reflects light. So they put on coatings that minimize that reflection. And that's very important. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then there's what's called the Kellner eyepiece. I have at least one of those here. This is a Kellner eyepiece, and it uses, it's very much like the Ramsden eyepieces. And these were really good. These were considered the standard up until the 1940s when somebody came along, a guy by the name of Plössl, or probably pronounced Plössl, P-L-O with an umlaut, S-S-L. And he came up with what here in America we call the Plössl eyepiece. And the Plössl is essentially, it's a pair, it's two doublet lenses working together. And these are really good. They give a very wide field of view. That means, you don't have to be dead center on it to see something through your eyepiece. If you've ever looked up, you had people look through eyepiece and go, oh, I can't find it. It's because they have a narrow field of view. But one of the other things you have to think about with your eyepiece is eye relief. That is, how close do you have to get your eye to it to look through it? And the Plössl doesn't have the best eye relief. Now, going back to actually a different kind of eyepiece, an eyepiece called a Kellner, and I don't believe I have a Kellner here. But the Kellner, you can still get them. They're also, oh, actually I do. I have, but it's under a different name. It's called an achromatic Ramsden, or AR. This is from the old Criterion telescope company. These guys made great scopes for many, many years. But the Kellner, it's almost like a reverse Koenig lens. They have a fairly good field of view. They're really good at low magnification. They do have problems with internal reflections unless they have the good anti-reflective coatings on them. But these are good serviceable eyepieces, inexpensive, and you can still find these. I don't have any orthoscopic eyepieces, but there are orthoscopic eyepieces available, and they're very good. They use a triplet, which are 3 pieces of glass cemented together. And they're great for planetary viewing. They're not so good if you happen to get access to one. They're not so good when you pan. You can see that there's actually a distortion in the glass, and it's called the globe effect. And if you see it, you can see it. It makes it look like you're projecting the image you're looking at onto a globe. So it looks a little strange. But for planets, they're great. Then there is what is called the Plössl, which are 5-element eyepieces. They have a very wide field of view. They have good eye relief, but they're unusable at really high powers, when you start getting the lower numbers, say 6 millimeter, 8 millimeter, that sort of thing, because they have a certain astigmatism. But for wide field views, if you want to look at nebula and that sort of thing, Plössl eyepieces are great. And then there's the Naegler. Naeglers are great because there are several different designs of Naegler lenses. They have an ultra wide field of view going usually about 82 degrees. Some of them can go up to 110 degrees. That's a really wide field of view. They have excellent eye relief, but they are expensive. On the order of, you spent this much on your telescope and you spent that much on one eyepiece. So if you want to outfit your telescope with a whole bunch of wide range of Naegler lenses, you'd better be prepared to take out a second mortgage. And they're heavy. Sometimes they can weigh, the eyepiece itself can weigh as much as a pound. I mean, the heaviest eyepiece I have here is this Plössl, and it's maybe about 4 ounces or so. I'd have to check it. So my recommendation, if you're just getting eyepieces and don't have any other, set yourself up with a bunch of Plössls. They're good for planetary viewing. They're good for deep sky objects. They're just a good all-around usable eyepiece. And most of the eyepieces I have are Plössls. Now, one recommendation I definitely have to make, keep your eyepieces clean. You can clean them, but it's tedious, and you run the risk of scratching the glass, or scratching the coatings, or completely removing the coatings. So there goes the anti-reflective properties of it. So keep them clean. If they come in a box, keep them in the box. And Mead, I love these. They come in these little tubes that have a foot to stand on. And so I really like the containers for the Mead scope, or for the Mead eyepieces. If you can't keep them in that, then keep them in something that can keep them corralled. For my loose eyepieces, like my old Criterion, very old Celestron, I keep them in something like this. I cut this out of foam, and it goes into my eyepiece box, or my accessories box, and the eyepieces just fit right down in it, and it works really well. And all I did is I took a piece of foam. You can still see the pen marks on some of it. Let's see. Yeah, see the pen mark there where I put an eyepiece down, traced around it, and then I used a heated wire cutter, just cut out these holes, and it works really great for me. So that's what I've got for this week. If you have questions about eyepieces or pretty much anything, leave a comment. If you want a quicker response, I do respond very quickly to the folks who ask me questions on my Patreon account. And my Patreon account is patreon.com/planet of mystery. That's planet_of_mystery. And for as little as $1 a month, you get access to a professional astronomer who's been doing this for, I don't want to think about how many years, but well over 20. I got started back in 1969, so that'll tell you how long I've had an interest in astronomy, and then professionally started in 1987. So I've been at this a while. And you have access to me to ask me questions, to make suggestions. Also have exclusive content that I have only for my patrons. Last year I did a gift guide. I do giveaways, prize drawings, that sort of thing. So consider going over to Patreon and becoming a patron and helping yourself out, helping me out, and I'll keep bringing you coffee and astronomy. We'll see you next week.